Hi, my name is Willem Hart. I'm a second year at Western's Faculty of Education. Today, I'll be presenting on financial literacy education and how to teach financial literacy, as well as some ideas on pedagogy and theory. I'm trying to go quick, so this might go for about 40 minutes. I found this subject area so incredibly fascinating. When the Ministry of Education announced that this was going to be a priority, I was very happy. I mean, this was so incredibly long overdue and so badly needed. That's why for my AFEs in the summer, I made this a major focus of my independent studies. I worked with a teacher who teaches both math and business studies to hone in on how to investigate this more closely. And I've been providing some lessons here and there, but I'm still fine tuning my stuff. It's a really fun thing to teach. And even if you're one of those teachers who doesn't like lesson planning, this can still be pretty fun. I've heard from other teachers in the field that kids are really warm to this, especially in the intermediate panel. So good for you for picking such a good session. Financial literacy is a new topic in the OSSD curriculum, and its appearances in K to 12 span across the gamut. So this presentation is relevant to teacher candidates qualifying to teach any cohort. Firstly, we're going to set a basic understanding of what is financial literacy, what is not financial literacy, and how we go about understanding this new concept. Second, we're quickly going to explore where in K to 12, but really 4 to 12, this concept emerges along the standard curriculum track. Third, the basics. I've divided it up between basic and intermediate concepts. The basics have to be mastered before going further, otherwise this won't make sense to students. Fourth, intermediate concepts you can explore in your classroom after the basics. Fifth, a look at what resources are available, probably going to be the shortest section because there are so few. Six, the bigger picture of the implications for financial literacy education. And seven, a Q&A if this was a synchronous presentation. It's not, so there's no Q&A. Part one, the introduction. How do we define financial literacy? I don't really see a point in making a grand distinction between financial literacy and personal finance. You might want to conceptualize it as one is knowledge understanding and the other is application if you want to use education, Ministry of Education terminology. Either way, this is practical knowledge. We're developing skills. We create an understanding in students so they can do something with it. It's not really so theoretical. We do use concepts and talk about things that are intangible, like credit, value, debt, but practicality is a huge part of this pedagogy. Here are the different definitions for financial literacy and personal finance. I don't really see a point in making a grand distinction between the two. You might want to conceptualize it as one is the knowledge slash understanding, the other is application, if you want to use Ministry of Education terminology. Either way, this is practical knowledge. We're developing skills. We create an understanding so kids can use it. It's not really theoretical. We do use concepts and talk about things that are intangible, like credit, value, debt, but practicality is a huge part of this pedagogy. Let's look for a second at what is not financial literacy. To the math teachers here, think of financial literacy as a set. This is stuff that is not in the set. Financial math, this is what I had to do in grade 11 M math, not financial literacy. Plugging away numbers into formulas and finding values of stocks and compound interest and whatever with no applicable real life component, not financial literacy education. Accounting, too, not financial literacy. Finance and accounting are two separate disciplines, two different classes of professionals, two different fields. Accountants organize information, finance professionals make executive decisions with that information. Accounting does not have that decision making dimension to it. Critiquing capitalism, important, necessary, wonderful, but this is not financial literacy either. This belongs in a different category of citizenship education, closer to social justice literacy. I did find a resource that tried to suggest that this was in the umbrella of financial literacy. I would argue personally that it is not. Um, the main takeaway here is that in order for something to be in the set of financial literacy, there needs to be applicability. If the scenario your students are looking at doesn't resemble something that can actually happen in real life, then there is no point. Financial literacy education that applies to real life cannot be accompanied by memorizing formula or preparing spreadsheets or whatever. And and that's the T. The second major core concept behind financial literacy education. Financial literacy is mathematical. Finance is mathematical. These numbers have to mean something and they need to have value. Certain curricula is explicitly designed to reinforce and strengthen student understanding of math concepts. That doesn't mean connect every single math concept to financial literacy. That would be a terrible idea. But this is a necessary part of the picture here. We'll talk in greater detail in later in the presentation about how to correctly integrate math and quantitative reasoning into financial literacy education. But the key takeaway here is that it is absolutely a necessary part of financial literacy. Financial literacy education, or FLE, a citizenship education. Citizenship education is a term and a concept to which I don't think enough pre-service teachers are sufficiently exposed. I can't recall off the top of my head what the surveys are, but different research organizations do rolling studies on public attitudes towards education. And the answer that consistently ranks in the top reason, according to Ontarians, about what is the purpose of school is to make good citizens. This does not only mean students who understand politics or who vote or volunteer, but also who can interact with civil institutions like banks, employers, like markets. How do I choose which credit card to get? Who can help me with my taxes? The idea here and the core concept is decision making, making smart choices, A or B and why. So the core concepts, just to review, are quantitative thinking, or the math, applicability to real world scenarios, and smart decision making, financially literate decision making. If your material doesn't fit into these columns, scrap it. If you can't honestly, quickly, and authentically answer a student who might ask, why are we learning it? Why are we learning this? It isn't financial literacy education. Inspiring learning. I like this transition. Why do we teach it, and why am I teaching you how to teach it right now? Well, there's a benefit to financial literacy. Control over your finances is a big part of a person's life. There are consequences of financial illiteracy. Financial illiteracy is a serious, serious thing. Anyone watching this, I'm assuming you're an adult, and I don't need to tell you the negative outcomes that come with poor financial decision making: debt, insecurity, negative mental associations with finance, mental health problems, marital problems. Be honest, this comes up again, but it shouldn't be too complicated. They don't pay us extra to lie to kids, and why this is so important. On the math part, no student should be turned off of financial literacy because of the math component. It's meant to be manageable, not even at grade level. Let's say you're doing something in grade 7, in your bag of tricks, you already have all the mathematical, arithmetical tools to master the basics of financial literacy. It should never be a barrier to mastering at least the basics of personal finance. History of FLE in Ontario. So this was a long time coming. The train moves really slowly, and it took a lot of time and a lot of effort to get this finalized at the ministry level. It took about 10 years of people, experts, and advocates pushing for it to become a reality. Until 2018, this did not really exist anywhere. An overall curriculum, very sparsely. The Wynne government hymns and haws for a couple years about how good this is and something that should be supported. 2018, 2019, this was added to grade 10 careers. This was a good first step. 2020, the Ford government mandates FLE as a core part of the 4 to 8 math curriculum. I say sort of because I don't think it's been so easy or really possible to implement a brand new math curriculum during such an unusual time, i.e. the pandemic. But we'll let the historians judge that one. So this is new. This is virgin territory for a lot of people. Don't let that spook you. It's pretty simple stuff. The equity considerations, this is a fun one. Money is a constant in our society and in our lives. There are supposedly only two things that are guaranteed: death and taxes. I mean, it's just an escapable part of existing. And yet we don't really talk about money as much as we should. So as we just saw, it took until 2020 for this to enter the elementary stream. There's a small component in careers, which is a half course to start. So a quarter of a semester at a 2 semester school. So really, really not that much. The result was an unequal access to financial literacy education. School is, in theory, supposed to be a great equalizer. Before this, only students with financially literate and financially comfortable homes got exposure. And this is important because financial literacy is a requirement for financial success. It's necessary, not sufficient. You can be financially literate and still be unsuccessful, but in order to be financially successful, you need to be financially literate. You will never meet a person who has accomplished financial success who is also financially illiterate. Financial literacy will always lead uh, Financial illiteracy will always lead to a lack of financial success. Financial literacy education can actually counter some uh, financial inequality in our society. So, continuing on equity considerations, knowledge about finance, attitudes towards money, norms regarding how to or if to discuss money, it varies among different socioeconomic positions. I use these terms very loosely, just a heads up, and these are generalizations, but middle class values say that talking openly about money is impolite. In the more challenged socioeconomic status, it's not comfortable to talk about money because it's a problem. For the upper class, money is spoken of openly, confidently, comfortably. Got a huge bonus this Christmas? Tell your friends. Got a good stock tip? Call your cousin. Got a good deal on a new set of golf clubs? Put it on Facebook. These patterns reproduce themselves when financial literacy education in schools is absent. A parent who is proficient with money, has money, talks about it, and teaches their kids the importance of saving, making an income, whatever will more likely have a financial, they'll be more likely to have a financially literate child. Financial literacy in school bridges this inequality, it bridges this gap. Students from any socioeconomic background can learn how to make smart financial choices and grow their comfort level with money. Part two, curriculum integration. Where does FLE fit into the K 12 curriculum? And this part is going to be shorter. This is a page from the Grade 10 Careers curriculum document. This is where FLE existed explicitly, originally. The goal is to have students plan their post-high school lives, explore options and compare costs. Never enough to actually make a financially literate citizen. It just wasn't enough, not by a long shot. By the way, just so everyone knows, if you teach in high school, you'll probably teach careers at least once. It isn't a teachable, so it's easy to fit into anyone's schedule. You have 2 lines of science and there's no more courses in the department. You might get filled with civics or careers. So everyone's in high school has a really good shot of teaching this. In the 4 to 8 math curriculum, there's a mix of literacy and monetary understanding, which aren't the same, but they complement each other. This is the recent most change to FLE. 4 to 8 has a financial literacy component now. Some parts of it doesn't really qualify as FLE. Having a child understand that 10 dimes makes a dollar isn't financial literacy because it doesn't have to do with making choices, but that's a building block. Understanding monetary denominations and monetary understanding, for lack of a better term, is a building block to financial literacy. Um, there are some resources from the ministry. The directive to implement a new math curriculum during the pandemic, um, you know, say what you will. There are few resources for in-person learning, probably very few for financial literacy asynchronously or remotely. Where can you fit it in? So 4 to 8 with math or without math. It doesn't have to be part of the math core. You can fit it around. 1 to 3 in math or social studies, very basic as a building block. It's not required, but you can. It appears more so in the secondary panel in careers, as we saw. Mathematics, especially in workplace preparation courses. Business studies have a financial component within it. You can look at personal finance, economics, family studies, and that kind of rounds it off. The asterisks denote that these courses are optional. Students can get their Ontario Secondary School diploma without taking any of these courses. And it should be noted that most of these courses are open level courses, so anyone can take them. As we said before, math is part of FLE. It's not all of it. If the material relies too heavily on quantitative reasoning, kids kind of check out. it becomes boring when on a subject that's really not. And some kids will see it as out of reach, again, when it's really not. Too much math will detract from the component of applicability of financial literacy. The math is supposed to be simple. You can deliver lessons at the basic and intermediate levels with just simple math operations and concepts. Absolutely, by grade 9, these are fair game. Addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. I mean, really, it should not be that hard. I wouldn't teach a new math concept if you're not the math teacher. FLE can reinforce already existing concepts that the students possess. And you deal with the math anxiety by reassuring students that this is not the difficult component. Part 3, the basics. Concepts should be taught linearly. You start with the basics. You can't expect a kid to be able to compare credit card deals before being able to evaluate a simple budget. These concepts round out the basic ideas: saving, spending, budgeting, budgetary surplus, budgetary deficit, debt, borrowing, and interest. Those are the basics. Institutions play an important role. Most important is the individual student. You reinforce the importance of individual decision making. You choose, it's your money and your future. I like to borrow a concept from economics, microeconomics to be exact. Each person is their own firm and they are the CEO. They make the choices for the company, they themselves. The continuum of citizenship education, of which financial literacy is one part. These stages are sequential. They're not always so neatly like this, they overlap. But we start with growing knowledge and understanding. We move on to developing skills, which can include math skills, and move into cultivating positive attitudes towards money and finance. The end goal is the fourth overall. We want students to engage with this material outside the classroom. Fortunately, money and finance are inescapable realities of living, so they will be engaging it no matter what. But it's only if we succeed in the first 3 stages that they'll be successful in the 4th stage and be able to engage and practice financially literate decision making. This is an actual slide from one of my lessons. Personal finance is personal. Each person, yes, you, even you, are a microeconomic actor in our economy. Each individual person is, theoretically, their own financial institution. Whether or not a person succeeds financially comes down to individual choices to a major extent. And this is part of empowering students to make good financial resources and financial decisions and to tune in to financial literacy education. I want to note that investing is not a basic part of this. I explained to people in my circle about financial literacy and personal finance and teaching, and for some reason, the first thing that comes to their mind is teaching kids how to invest their money. This is so far beyond what a student can grasp in the basics. I don't think there are very many kids that can understand financial investing. Most adults do not. People automatically think investing means investing stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities, securities, whatever. In reality, the term has many meanings. The meaning that is best to emphasize in a financial literacy education lesson in schools is the concept of investing in yourself. And this is really applicable in planning post-secondary, part of their careers. Examples of basic FLE. As you can see, when I said basic, I meant it. I'm sure any person watching this can do these things because we're adults. Wants versus needs. Hey, some kids need it spelled out. Uber Eats is not a need. Netflix is not a need. Building a budget is the classic lesson. Having kids calculate if a person is over or under their monthly budget, if it's a deficit or a surplus, that's pretty basic. These are the basics. There's more, but if you can get through these 6 or so, you're rocking. You've accomplished what you need to accomplish. This is an example of a demo or a quest, whatever your school uses, whatever terminology. Not quite a test, but more than a quiz. I was brought up with the term demo. My old school now uses the term quest. An example of a culminating assignment: I give students a person's budget. You are trying to help Anita get out of debt and get back into financial health. Identify which expenses are wants and which are needs, total them up. How much is she over budget in money, and then show it to me in percents if you teach that. There's a qualitative short answer. How can she reach financial health? So this is not a math-based answer. Looking for answers more like income, less expenses, borrow from family, sell stuff, whatever. And just to give you an idea, this is what the budget is. Not so many numbers. It's obvious which ones are the wants and which ones are the needs. Uh, you need to get through the basics first before culminating, obviously, and I think this was a really good one. Intermediate FLE. So you need to get through the basics first. Remember linearity, or else this is useless. It's not always needed. This can sometimes exceed curriculum expectations. Again, you might have a class that loves this, so there's an interest in going deeper. Using basic building blocks, don't borrow too heavily on new concepts. Elements of FLE, some of them, investing if you keep it simple, if you keep the math simple. Credit cards, understanding what a credit score is, understanding credit and how to build good credit. I think credit is particularly important in FLE. It certainly doesn't belong in the basic column, but credit can really define a person's relationship with money, as well as the banking institutions later in life. It also sort of bounces off the character education dimension. Paying your debt is rewarded, financial delinquency is punished, and there are other more advanced concepts like subject-specific financial education. Ask a kid, what do you want to look into? Any specific subject, car loans, paying for university or college, applying for a credit card. Don't go crazy, but things that are guided by student interest. There is scenario specific FLE, home in on a specific microeconomic activity, being a smart consumer, talking about shopping addiction, being a smart shopper at a grocery store, at a gym, and taking out a membership. At this point, math is not really the emphasis, but it reverts back to knowledge acquisition, and that's okay more generally. So, for example, grocery shopping. Explore the ways grocers manipulate people into making bad financial decisions at the supermarket. It's a really fun lesson that I have, good for 7 to 10. How to make good financial decisions when you're getting your groceries, how to avoid the traps, emphasizing practicality. For example, comparing whole fruit to pre-cut fruit, calculating the difference in price, the markup, converting it to a percentage, and there's room around there. This is an actual slide from my lessons. What the ending is, what is the, what I want to leave them with, and understand what's the kernel of knowledge that we gain from this area of financial literacy. This is another slide from an actual lesson. This is from a micro lesson on ordering out versus preparing your own food. Young people today order way too much food from delivery apps. It's a big impediment to saving money when you spend $40 two or three or four or five times a week. You leave them with the facts, and then the takeaway, like with other subjects, you want to look at the practical side. Look into the real cost of Uber Eats or whatever other apps they use. There's like a new one every month now, and you compare. Comparing leads to making choices, calculating differences. The aha moment comes when a student sees for themselves that the numbers tell a story, that there's an 80% markup when you use one of these apps. And that's not a smart financial decision. Uh, Part 5, resources, another short section. There's not a lot out there. Financial literacy might be virgin territory, but the resources available might more so resemble a barren field. Give it time. The pool will start populating with resources when it becomes more formal. As a profession, we have to evaluate what works. It takes time. Remember, things move slow in this business. The result is teachers who teach this. They make up their own material. It's fun. It's not everyone's strong suit. Not everyone likes it. The virtual AFE is a good opportunity to start building a bag of tricks and create resources. The ministry's got some stuff. It's jumbled, and financial literacy is kind of mixed with coding, I guess. I don't know. It's wasn't the best place to look. EduGains was really good. Lots of video-based stuff, useful for remote or asynchronous learning. This organization is they have a good reputation, and they organize by subject really well. The Ontario Teacher Federation has a bank of resources that anyone can access, including French immersion resources, which is really good. Obviously, you still need to evaluate for yourself and use professional judgment what you think is and isn't a good resource, because that's your responsibility. And again, there's not that much out there, so take it with a grain of salt. On subject-specific financial literacy, this is the best out there. I love them. It's a YouTube channel called 2 Cents. They're a couple, and they make some really interesting videos on financial literacy. Every fact and every piece of data is sourced. It's PBS, a public broadcaster, so it's really trustworthy. As it is American, I don't find that it makes it less applicable to Canadian students, but really I encourage you to check them out. I learned so much from this channel. It's actually really bingeable content. If you can adapt lessons from their videos, you can, and I do that, and it's really simple. So the last part, the bigger picture. So it's a new topic, and there's some implications of that. There are fewer resources. You want a lesson on mental health or fractions or the 3 branches of government, there are more resources and more lessons out there than you can shake a stick at. Financial literacy, not so much, as we saw. Opportunities to bring this in the classroom are kind of limited. I don't see this being applicable to science or gym. Let's just be honest. As a profession, I don't think there's an established right way to teach this yet. It hasn't really been explored because it's so new. And that's kind of the fun part. You, future teachers, get to explore this material and use your judgment and kind of lead the way. And that's really, really exciting, if you ask me. The underlying approach, this is my opinion, but individualism seems to be the underlying approach. It's the implicit curriculum attitude here. We are teaching students that they can affect their future financial positions, their future financial health. People make these choices individually. There is circumstance, but there is also self-control. If you have convinced a student that they have the power to chart their own financial course, you have succeeded as a teacher. Another slide. Kofi Annan from the UN, a Nobel Peace Laureate, really interesting guy. Knowledge is power. She comes up a lot in my lessons. Judge Judy, win or lose, it's how you choose. It's the title of a book she wrote, a children's book that touches on this. I mean, you probably watched the show, you know what she's about, but that's the attitude. Um, and the underlying approach, the other one, other than individualism, is honesty. Be honest with students. When it comes to finance, teach them what you would have liked to know when you were their age. I'm sure we've all had a moment facing a financial decision where we think, oh my God, why didn't they teach us in school? Be the change you want to see. I know that's a cliche, but work with me here. Explain, be upfront, show them why it's important. What are the consequences of financial literacy? Give statistics. Make the case why society needs financially literate people. Be sensitive, don't overdo it. This is just what fits on a PowerPoint slide. There's no shortage of information that justifies teaching financial literacy. The outlook for some of the younger people that will be teaching is pretty bleak if you consider some of the stats, but we as teachers can change this. So I think there's a lot to do here. There's a lot of growth here for the profession, for the subject area, and for teachers, for you teacher candidates individually, where you want to go with this, because a lot of this was just kind of interpretation of what I learned in my AFE, but it's up to you to make the resources and really define it, and that's super fun. And so thank you for watching, and keep teaching.